Montevideo, Uruguay, July 3rd, 1752, 10 in the morning. The wind howled through the tarps covering the windows, its fury shaking the makeshift cabin. Inside, Captain Felicia de Fonseca sat alone in a worn wooden chair. Just 2 more days, he thought. He lifted a glass to his lips and downed another shot of rum. He scowled around the dim, shabby room. 10 long months had passed in this miserable port, but now, at last, the final provisions for the ship were ready. All that remained was to load the last of the food supplies and ferry them over to the ship, Nuestra Señora de la Luz, or Our Lady of the Light. Fonseca couldn't help but grin. Just thinking of her made him smile. He didn't notice the wind picking up, now causing the tarps to whistle in the gusts. And why not smile, he thought. Everything was going according to plan. It had been more than 4 long years since La Luz had set sail from Portugal, marking the start of their elaborate mission. Fonseca wasn't one of the primary investors who had formed the company or struck the deal with King Fernando VII of Spain, but he had captained the ship. Now aboard La Luz were 12,500 freshly minted gold coins bound for the king. The agreement with King Ferdinand was a 50-50 split, and Fonseca was due a generous share. But there was something even better. As captain, Fonseca was one of the few who knew about the cargo not listed on the manifest. Hidden deep in La Luz's powder hold were 200,000 pesos worth of gold coins, plus 40 large gold bars and discs. These treasures were a secret to the king, and they would be his alone. The only thing left was to sail La Luz back to Spain. Suddenly, the loud chatter of voices from the street interrupted Fonseca's thoughts. Damn drunken locals, he thought. God knows he wouldn't miss this place. The 3 years spent in Buenos Aires had been far more tolerable than in Montevideo. Buenos Aires had beautiful women. Montevideo had hardly any women at all, and the few here could hardly interest even the most lonely of sailors. Buenos Aires had bars, entertainment, and culture. And good rum, not the goat's piss Fonseca was stuck with here. He threw back another shot. His mind drifted to his friend, Pedro de Lea. Pedro was a good man. He had done a fine job. Pedro had been the company's official representative in Buenos Aires, where he coordinated the transport of the 12,500 gold coins and the hidden treasure from Lima and Santiago. Pedro had grown fond of the newly minted escudos from Santiago. Those machines were an impressive new invention, but Fonseca preferred the traditional hand-pressed coins from Lima. Each of those gold coins bore the beautiful coat of arms of the Spanish royal family. And rightly so. Spain was the richest and most glorious nation in the world. Strong gusts of wind battered the tarp now, but Fonseca was too lost in thought to notice. Where was Pedro anyway? Fonseca wished his friend would come and join him for a morning drink. He missed the wit that Pedro brought to start the day, but he did not miss Pedro's constant worrying. Fonseca chuckled to himself. How many times had De Lea complained about the weight of the cargo on La Luz? Too many to count. Sure, the 12,500 gold coins, the 155 passengers, the cargo, animals, and months of rations pushed the ship past its weight limit. Yes, the 12 cannons La Luz carried under the pretense of being a warship were heavy, but all of it was necessary to safely transport the gold. Fonseca raised his bottle high, preparing to take another swig. But his drink was interrupted when the door to his cabin suddenly swung open. Pedro de Lea stood in the doorway, wide-eyed. Pedro de Lea, Pampero, Pampero. Those words seemed to drag out slowly, Fonseca thought. Pedro de Lea, come! Outside, the wind howled and moaned. Trees bent at 45-degree angles. How did I not notice this? Fonseca muttered. Though he struggled to keep up with his friend, he knew exactly where they were headed. They were running to the pier. Pamperos were no ordinary winds. When one formed, it could whip through the Rio de la Plata with incredible power. A pampero could hit the summer months with such ferocity that the winds could reach up to 180 kilometers per hour. And now one had arrived while over 130 people were on board La Luz, anchored about 3 miles offshore. As captain, Fonseca knew he had to get to his ship, evacuate the crew and passengers, and unload as much cargo as possible. Everything had to come back to shore. Meanwhile, on board La Luz, the crew had made a decision without the captain. A boat that heavy anchored in the bay would be pounded mercilessly by the waves in a matter of hours. The crew swiftly hoisted the anchor. At the pier, Fonseca was relieved to find his other 4 crew members waiting for him at the dock. "Fonseca, let's go!" The 6 men quickly boarded the same boat that had brought them and 18 other passengers back to the dock a couple of weeks earlier. Waves were already crashing onto the dock. The spray hit them in the face. 30 minutes later, and less than 200 yards from shore, Fonseca knew this Pampero was too fierce, the swells were too high. Getting to La Luz was impossible. He glanced at Pedro, whose eyes mirrored Fonseca's own sadness and resignation. Fonseca raised his hand, signaling to turn their boat back to shore. By the time the 6 men stepped back onto the dock, they were drenched. Captain Fonseca turned, took out his telescope, and trained it on the bay. Some 3 miles out, the bow of a small ship had turned toward the sea. The waves battered its sides. Behind it, black clouds consumed the horizon. A cold shiver ran down Fonseca's spine. La Luz was drifting away. On July 3rd, 1752, Nuestra Señora de la Luz sank in a violent storm near the coast of Montevideo, Brazil. The wreckage scattered over 50 miles. Tragically, none of the passengers survived. Many were later found washed ashore, their pockets filled with gold coins. Thanks to the efforts of Captain Fonseca, over 90% of the cargo was recovered within a year. However, the hidden cargo in the gunpowder hold was never found, as it had never been meant to exist. The waters of the Rio de la Plata are among the most dangerous shipwreck graveyards in the world. More than 1,000 ships have vanished into its treacherous depths. Given this fact, keeping the overweighted La Luz docked there for months was an inherently dangerous gamble, one worsened by the greed of its captain and the ship's owners. In 1993, wreckage from La Luz was discovered by Senor Ruben Corella while searching for another wreck, El Preciado. About 50 miles from the Bay of Montevideo, the remains of the lost treasure, dozens of gold ingots and thousands of gold coins, were finally brought to the surface.